These division jumps into action. Some divisional playoff races begin to take form, and a blockbuster trade goes down in the north. All that and more comes up on the Junior Beast Pod on CROW LAX TV.
Welcome back to the Junior Beast Pod. As always, my name is Keenen, joined by my co-host Muhammad. How are you doing this week? Because I know this past weekend was jam-packed with Tier 1 action.
Yeah, if you look across the landscape, every division in action, pretty much every team aside from the Kings, I believe, played this weekend. Don't quote me on that, but I believe that's the case. And there was plenty of results to look out for and to recap here, and I'm looking forward to doing that here with you on the pod this week.
Same here, man. Same here. It's a lot to recap, so we should jump into it pretty soon here. But I know you had something that you wanted to talk about first before we jumped right in.
Yeah, and listen, I want to say this, and I want to bring this up because I think it's my responsibility to do so. And we have a platform here. We have people that tune in every week, and I really appreciate that. Get a lot of good feedback, and it makes all of this worth it. So I want to thank everybody first and foremost. And I'm not going to get too in depth with this. I'm not going to get too political, but it's just something that really kind of ticked me off. I saw on Instagram that the Canada Day tournament is accepting Israel into their field of teams, and I just have to say, I just think that's wrong. I think it's not. I think it's poor. It's in poor taste, poor form. You see Russia not even allowed to compete in the Olympics, and you've got a country that's flat out genocidal, and you got kids getting bombed and things like that, dying every day. And meanwhile, they're going to traipse over and play in a lacrosse tournament. I just think that that's fundamentally wrong, morally wrong. And I mean, I don't know if that can be changed, but I just wanted to point that out. I was really sickened by it. I saw it, like I said, I saw it on Instagram. I don't know what your thoughts are, Keenen, but I just think it's really unfortunate and really bothered me.
I know you mentioned it just like a couple minutes here before we went live with this episode, so I haven't really had full time to process it, so I'm going to hold my comments for now.
No, that's fair. I just think it's important. I would really regret it if I didn't even bring it up or mention it. And again, I'm not going to get too political here, but I just thought that was a bit of an oversight by our province, and I hope that there's some way that it can be rectified. But let's move on to much more lighter topics here, and let's talk about a huge trade that went down in the north. Graham Dickin moves to the CROW in exchange for a first, a third, and Hudson Beeler. And Keenen, you can double check that, but I'm pretty sure that's what the trade was. So Dickin moves from the Warriors to the CROW. And I just want to take a few minutes to talk about, what this means. I think the CROW, for them, I think this is a huge trade in the sense that their personnel, I think they needed a bit of an alpha dog, like the kind of bravado that Dickin holds himself with and plays with. I think guys can feed off of that. I think he's going to be somebody that could be a leader for them, a guy that can sort of change a lot of the feelings in that room to the positive. And I thought that was a major get for them. I think that they're doing a good job there and Guerin in particular, the head coach, and in a lot, he and Terry both doing a lot of the GM work, doing a good job of capitalizing on opportunity. I think it's wide open for them, and they're not worried about taking a minor risk here with this trade and maybe mortgaging a little bit of the future in drafts that aren't all that great. I think it's smart. I think it's calculated, and I think they're setting themselves up for a good run here. And I know they're going to try and be aggressive over the next couple of years. So give those guys a lot of credit. They've been working really hard there to turn the ship around after, what was a disappointing 2024 and a rebuild in 2023. So Good job by them. The Warriors get a roster player or a guy that I think can play for their team this year in Hudson Beeler, and a couple of higher end picks in exchange as they look to really kick into their rebuild. So a nice trade for the Crude in particular, I think. I think this establishes them as a contender, a top 4 or 5 team in the league. And I'm excited to see where things head from there. What are your thoughts on this trade?
Just to confirm, that was Dickin for just Beeler and the 2026 first. There was no third round thrown in on that trade.
All right.
So,
okay. Yeah. I wanted you to
Beeler
double check
first.
that. Okay. Because I know originally there was a third involved, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So thanks for that. So Dickin does move for a first and Hudson Beeler. Give everybody your thoughts on how you think this plays out for each team.
I think the Crude in this scenario, I think they're going to come out ahead. On the simple fact, and I know we'll get to it a bit later once we break down some of the results, is that you look at Dickin and the monster game that he had in his first game this season. I mean, I think it's already paying its dividends to the Crude, and I think time will more so time is going to tell if the Crude gaining, Graham Dickin was 2023's top scorer. So I mean, that already in and of itself, that's a little badge on the chest of Graham Dickin. So I think the Crude come out on top on this, and like you said, it's a bit of maybe a little shallower of a draft this year. So nonetheless, the Warriors still get a really high pick, having that first round pick in 2026. So I mean, props to the Warriors for getting that first round and the roster player of Beeler. But yeah, I think the Crude come out ahead in this trade.
Yeah, and I think also when you're talking about Dickin in particular, he's a guy. Look, he's going to score goals. He's one of the better players, one of the better individualistic players, just in terms of how he can create his own shot, and how he drives to the net and everything like that. And if the Crude can get him to play, to buy in and to do a little bit more off ball, to feed a little bit more, man, that's going to be a huge get for them. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do and what he's able to provide for them. I will say the one downside is that he's living in Calgary, so he won't be at practices at least until the playoffs. There'll be a game or two that he won't be at. But luckily for the Crude, most of their games are on the weekend, so he'll be there, and I think they're poised to go on a run.
Yeah, I think this is definitely, like I said, the past couple of weeks, I think this is the Crude's year to capitalize on as we're going to break down here in a minute, as what seems to be more of a rebuilding year for the Warriors and potentially the Outlaws still.
Yeah, Keenan. So with that, before we get into the game recaps, I think we need to do a bit of a divisional preview for the East as they got going this week. And I want to shout out who's a guy that I've developed a little bit of a friendship with, at least online, Jarrett Wood, the head coach of the Manitoba Blizzard Winnipeg Blizzard, I should say, over the last few seasons. He has stepped down, and he and his staff have stepped down, but he shared some information with me that I thought was noteworthy, and I want to pass it along to the listeners. So if you're looking at the East this year, Winnipeg is going through a complete rebuild. They're a whole new coaching staff, as I just mentioned, 15-player overhaul, give or take a couple of guys. They're going to be, they're a program that restocks better than anyone, so I don't think that's going to, write them off by any means, but they are going to be a lot younger. I would assume they'd probably be a little bit smaller. They are a team that's been big over the last few seasons, or really historically. So maybe they lose some of that size and experience. They're going to look a little different this year. Meanwhile, Saskatchewan, they're doing the same thing like Saskatoon, the SWAT. They're doing the same thing as they did last year, where the first part of the season especially, they're going to be moving guys between A and B all the time. And a lot of the guys that are going to be playing in some of these games, like this past weekend, will be guys on the A team. So some of their results might not be, things that you can really go off of moving forward. We'll get to that a little later on. But I was thinking maybe this was a year that the SWAT could maybe step up and do some damage. But I just don't know if the players are there and the depth is there, given the fact they have an A team. And he said Jared also mentioned that the SWAT have their Tier 2 team and the PGLL come back, so that's even more maybe potentially more players divvied out between an extra team. So we'll see what the SWAT have to offer. And then meanwhile, Regina is returning McDonald and Lenz. They're two snipers. And, the rumors were over the last couple of seasons, or over last season anyway, that they would be going to A. But the thought process is, according to Jarrett, that McDonald and Lenz are away for so much of the year. McDonald plays hockey, I think, in Manitoba, and Lenz plays lacrosse and field lacrosse in the States. So they spend so much time away. I think that they want to come home and play with guys they've played with for 10, 12 years and take a run at it. This is a team that's sort of fallen short. They've had trouble keeping the ball out of their net over the last few years. But I think the talent is there, for the Kings to perhaps go on a run. They haven't played yet, so we'll see. But that was sort of the rundown that I got out of the East. I don't know if you have anything to add there, but I thought that was interesting. I thought that there was some good information there.
I don't have a whole lot to add. I know this past weekend was the first little bit of taste of action that we had between the Blizz and the SWAT, with the Kings still on the bench until this coming Saturday. But yeah, no, I'm interested to see how the East shapes up, especially knowing everything that good old Mr. Wood had told you. So yeah, I think the East is going to be very interesting to watch, just in general, knowing that honestly, that second place spot could go either way between the Blizz and the SWAT, since, the Kings seem to kind of be in that win now mode.
Yeah, I think it sets up for the Kings this year. They definitely, I think, should be the most experienced and the oldest team in the division. But I wouldn't count out the Blizzard, man. Like, again, culture and just sort of the internal confidence that some of these clubs have that are used to winning, it usually shows through, and it comes through later in the season as teams start to prepare for the playoffs and then get into the playoffs. So I wouldn't count out Winnipeg. I think you'll see probably another good series between Winnipeg and the Kings, and whether or not the Kings can get over the hump, that remains to be seen. But I think that'll be if that is the final out east, I think that sets up for another interesting series. So, Keenen, with that, let's get into some of these recaps, as it was a busy week number 3. And let's start Thursday night, where the Mountaineers fell to the Marauders by a score of 10-8. Now, this game was not shown, so I don't have too much on it. I know the Mountaineers were up after the first. The Marauders would take charge later in the game and hold on for the win. And the Marauders continue to be tough at home. That is a barn that's difficult to go into. Again, it's a little ways out of Calgary, even for teams out of Calgary to travel to. You're in the car for a little longer and whatever. You can throw some guys off. Good job by the Marauders as they continue to pile up some wins. And I think that South Division is wide open. I think all three of those teams look pretty evenly matched. Aside from the fact that the Marauders can't seem to figure out how to play the Shamrocks, they get beaten pretty soundly by them all the time. Other than that, though, like all those teams, I think, skill-wise match up relatively well with one another. And, maybe that's a tight race for that second spot and home floor advantage in the first round between, whoever doesn't finish first. But I don't know, anything to add there, Marauders, Mountaineers?
I think I have more so to add on just your comment about how this division's wide open. And I think that's just proven by how, just in general, how the South shaped up this past weekend. If you take out the opening weekend win that the Marauders had against the CROW, all three of those teams down south are 4-2. And that's including the auto wins from the Rockies. But still, either way, that's all three clubs sitting 4-2. I think this is the most evenly matched South Division we have had in years down there. And these final scores are proving it too. Like you say, the Marauders just can't really figure out the Shamrocks, and I agree. I think that's just unfortunate for the Marauders that they just can't quite figure them out. But there's going to be those teams where some of these teams just they can't quite solve the woes that they have with them, right? So, I think that was a hell of a game, though. Definitely.
Yeah, and somebody mentioned this to me the other day, and I wish I had remembered to fact check this before we started this podcast. But somebody said that the Marauders had not beaten the Shamrocks for 7 seasons up until now. So that's still going. I'd have to. I think they might have beat them in an exhibition game or something. 7 years ago or something like that. But that's what was said to me, and it sort of checked out. But I didn't remember to actually go back and look.
Well, you keep going on. I'm gonna fact check you right now as you move on with the rest of everything.
Feel free to do that and let everybody know what the deal with that is. But I mean, if that's the case, that is a crazy long time and something that's obviously in the heads of a lot of. I mean, even though those guys have changed over and there wouldn't be anybody left from that team 7 years ago, just year to year, you have that carryover and you have that sort of feel every time you play a team. It's in your heads and organizationally as well. And that is, I think that's an interesting thing to note as we look forward to how that South Division shapes up.
Well, I can confirm that the Marauders have recently beaten the Shamrocks. They beat them in 2 out of the 3 games in 2023. It was
really,
they were tight games. They were very tight games, but before that, I think it was a little bit, because 2022 they didn't have a single win against them, and then the shortened 21 season was the same thing. So,
right. And then if you look at 19, 18, and 17, what do you see there? Because I mean, I'm interested to know, just because a couple people had brought that up and I wanted to check it, but I just didn't remember.
Yeah, outside of those couple wins that they had in 23, I'm back in 2016 right now, and still no wins. I'm even further back now in 2015. They had a tie with them back in 2015, but still no actual outright wins against the Shamrocks.
Right. Okay. So basically, in the last decade, they won a couple games in 2023, and that was it.
Correct.
So there is a pattern there. There's definitely a pattern there. And I know in 2023 they met in the playoffs, and the Shamrocks won 2-0 in the first round. So there is something there. I'm glad that you pointed out that they did get those 2 wins in 2023. So not quite what we thought, but pretty close. And you got to think that if the Marauders are headed into the playoffs, they're probably wanting to see the Shamrocks finish first, so maybe they can get their footing under them before they have to meet them if they were to win and beat the Mountaineers. Because matchups do matter. As much as people want to say, hey, it's just whoever plays better that day, matchups matter, history matters, and it'll be interesting to see how that division shakes out. So let's move to Friday, Keenen. And on Friday night, the Warriors would host the Rebels, and the Rebels and the Warriors had met the last 3 seasons in the North Final, the Warriors winning the first 2 times, and then the Rebels finally getting over the hump and sweeping the Warriors a season ago. This one, not quite as competitive. I did this game, and there was a lot of breakaways for the Rebels. There was nobody getting off or tracking back for the Warriors. Guys were just running in straight lines from their own zone to the net, just wide open all over the place. Out of the gate, breakaways. I thought there was a lot of unforced turnovers in this game. The Rebels are reasonably athletic out of the back gate again and opportunistic as usual. I thought they did a good job of capitalizing on Warrior mistakes. Early on, Baker's shot was dialed. Manning took advantage of looks in transition, and as did the lanky Jack Nickel. And there's another guy on this team I wanted to talk about a little bit is Jackson Cohott. This is a guy who, before he got hurt late in that provincial tournament last year, was playing incredibly good lacrosse. I think he's a guy to watch for as the season moves along. I don't think he's hit his stride yet, but when he's on, man, he's just such a confident, powerful player. Can make his way to the net, beat guys one-on-one, draw guys over, dish. So I think if the Rebels are to hit their ceiling this year, he's a guy to watch for, but they dominated this game. I don't know if there's too much else to say. Keenen, thoughts on the the first meeting of the year between the Warriors and Rebels.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I think, and like we had covered this in the weeks leading up, and I think this game kind of turned out the way we expected. I mean, the Rebels just with the shelling of, leading 8-1 after the first, and then just piling on another 8 goals over the next 40 minutes of play. So, I mean, it's. I think this is more of just a reflection of just the Warriors being in that rebuild rather than like a specific mismatch, if anything else. So, I mean, it's unfortunate for the Warriors, but I mean, I think head coach Vey knows that, his team's in a bit of a rebuild cycle at the moment.
I think for the Warriors, like from their perspective, I think there was a lot that they just sort of gave the Rebels. Like there was a lot of easily correctable things here. Just the reverse transition, I just thought it burned them time and time again. It was just a lack of awareness. I don't know what was being said to those guys on the bench, but it just never got corrected. And they have played once since. They would play the next day. We'll get to that game in a second. But yeah, a lot of coaching needing to be done there in Warriorland, and we'll see if they can progress as the season moves along. Also, Saturday afternoon, the Rebels would play a back-to-back and host the Silvertips after their win Friday night at the Warriors. And the Silvertips would go up 4-0 early, lead 4-2 after 1, and then the Rebels just took over. And it's important to note the Silvertips did not have goaltender McDonough in net. He was with the Raiders, who would play a few hours later against the Miners in Edmonton. Manning, another statistical showing, 3 goals, 3 assists. The big lefty, he's proven he's going to be productive, or he has been so far this season. Or is not a lefty, he's a righty. I don't know what I'm talking about here. He's a righty, overtired or something. But the Rebels do start 2-0. Keenen, I know you did this game, so I want to hear your thoughts and what went down out in Fort Saskatchewan on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, so it was a bit of an interesting game, mostly from the perspective of the Silvertips just dominating, for a lack of a better term, basically dominating that first period against the Rebels. I mean, 4-2 after the second, and I was saying to cameraman that was with me, Tristan, I was telling him, like, it looked like a completely different team from what we saw against the Warriors. Like, the Rebels just, I don't know, the Silvertips were finding ways to beat them down low. They were finding ways to get around the ball, throw a couple guys off of their, off their intended targets, out of their lanes, and the Silvertips were able to capitalize. And then, I mean, the first goal of the second period came, I believe it was like 13 to 16 seconds in. Like, it was not very long, and I have I have zero clue what Darren Beret, head coach of the Rebels, had said in that locker room, but the game just opened up at the start of that second period for the Rebels, and they never took their foot off the gas. They had, I believe it was 7 or 8 unanswered goals against the Silvertips. Yeah, they were down 4-1 at one point, and then I think the score before the Silvertips scored again was 9-1 or something like, 9-4 or something like that. So, it was just a tremendous run by the Rebels, and I mean, you got to hand it to one guy who really stood out, and the stat sheet shows it, is Tyler Manning. I mean, he was all over the floor. He ends with 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points total, and a couple penalty minutes because, well, got to sit your time in the sin bin every now and then. So, but no, I think it was a very impressive showing by the Rebels to, claw their way back into a game that after the first, they're maybe a bit down on their heels, but the late goal in the first helped them out. And yeah, I think the Rebels just did a fantastic job against the Silvertips team, who is already a quarter of their way through their season in week 3.
Yeah, it's interesting how the schedule shakes out, especially this year. A little bit of a late start, and then some teams have played a couple games in each of the first few weeks, and then you got the Kings who haven't even started yet. So, yeah, it's different. I will ask you, Keenen, because you noted in the second period is when the Rebels took over. That's the short change out the offensive gate, the long change defensively. Was that a lot of transition? I didn't watch this game, so I wanted to ask you, was that the Rebels really taking advantage of transition in that game, or was it more 5-on-5 or power play that kind of took the game over for them?
I think a lot of it definitely had to do with the transition, because if you actually look at the box score for the middle frame, there was only a single, I believe it was a single power play goal, yeah. Kalik Simonson with the single power play goal in the second on, outside of the slashing calls and cross-checking calls at the end of the second there. It was the only power play in the entirety of the second. So it was definitely a lot of transition game for the Rebels, and I think they did a good job of, keeping the Silvertips back, using the body position, scoop up the ball, and keep it just out of reach of the defenders, right? So, I think the Rebels definitely capitalized on the Silvertips, who, I feel like this is something that we've talked about before, too, is the Silvertips, I feel, struggled a bit last year in transition as well, but the Rebels just, the way that offense is in transition, it's just so elite that it's hard to beat them.
Yeah, and I would say also when you're talking specifically about the Rebels, they do historically a very good job of being opportunistic in transition and pushing the ball and maybe taking some risks up the floor that other teams might not, or other teams will be more complacent and willing to just pull the ball out and set up. I think the Rebels are a lot like the Mavericks in that sense, and I think it's a smart way to play the game. And because any 2-on-1 or 3-on-2, or breakaway, those looks are almost always going to be better quality than what you're going to get in a 5-on-5 set. So I do think that stylistically they deserve a lot of credit for that. They're willing to push the pace that way, and I think it's part of what separates them from a lot of their competition. So it doesn't surprise me that that's what took the game over in the second period. Obviously, the Silvertips having some goaltending issues behind McDonough doesn't help. We'll see if they address that moving forward. I don't know what their plans are there, but I think that's something that they're going to have to look at figuring out.
And that being said, too, I know Jacob Orr was the goaltender for the whole game, but in that first, he definitely stood out as one of my top stars of that first 20 minutes, and I don't know if that early goal in the second really shook him up by the Rebels, but he was very solid in the first, and honestly, if you put him and McDonough side by side in that first, I don't think it would be much different.
All right, fair enough. So as we move across Saturday, the Outlaws also played in a matinee at the Warriors. So the Warriors start their season off with a pair of home games. And the Outlaws, they did this game as well. The Outlaws carried the play overall. They had most of the possession. I thought that they just looked a lot more poised on the floor. Their offense looked more comfortable. They moved the ball better. Kyle Jamieson gets 2 goals in his first ever Junior B game. So shout out to him. Not easy to do, especially as a rookie. I thought turnovers and lack of offensive threats plagued the Warriors in this one. Ava Pinch in net for the Warriors played pretty well in goal. She stopped quite a few breakaways and odd man looks. Just overall, a very disjointed game. Not too much to comment on here. I think this was a game the Outlaws needed to win. They got the win. They started off 1-0. Anything to add here?
I don't think there's anything much from me. I wasn't able to catch a whole lot of this game, but when I did, it seemed like the Outlaws definitely had their foot on the gas a lot of the time in this game.
Yeah, I honestly think the biggest difference in this game and why you didn't see the Outlaws extend this lead is because of Ava Pinch. I really do think she played well. I thought they might go back to Bialik after they pulled him halfway through the Rebels game, because I saw Vay go to him and talk to him, and he took his stuff off and went to the gate. And I assumed that was, look, we're going to put you back in tomorrow, just refocus and, just relax. I thought that's what that was, but obviously it wasn't, because they go with Ava the next day and she played well. So give her credit. Not easy to do. That was really her first start at this level as well. So the sibling of former goalie Tate Pinch, shows well for the Warriors, and maybe that's something to build on for them. But the Outlaws get the win there. Now let's move over to the East, where there's a pair of barn burners. First off, on Saturday night, Saskatchewan, the SWAT, go in and beat the Blizzard 9-8. And this game looks like it was an OT. We teed the Eastern Division up a little earlier. They get a bit of a surprise win, but again, what I heard specifically about this game was the SWAT had a bunch of guys playing that will be on their A team. So take maybe that result with a bit of a grain of salt. I don't know exactly what their personnel situation is, but they do start off the season 1-0, upset win against the Blizzard. Then the next day, now the RMLL site says that the Blizzard won a game in OT. Like this second game went to OT as well. But if you actually look at the box score, it doesn't make sense. Like it doesn't add up that way. So I assume it was actually in regulation. But either way, the Blizzard would win 6-5. So they split the weekend series. I do not think that this was. I mean, maybe the Blizzard. I think the Blizzard do have a channel, but I did not see any of this. They split, but they split that weekend series. Both teams opening up their series and starting the season off 1-1. What do you got here, Keenen?
Yeah, this is interesting the way that this was split between the two of them. So I'm just double checking here to see if they said anything about that second game going to overtime, and I'm not seeing anything personally, so undetermined there. Yeah, I think it's impressive, honestly, for the SWAT, albeit, as you said, there's potential that a lot of these guys are on their junior A squad. However, I think it's still impressive that the SWAT walk into Manitoba and come away with even a split on the weekend. It seems to me like Notre Dame Arena has been very hard for teams to come into and win, outside of maybe one or two games here and there. And to win by that close of a score in an overtime like that is even more impressive, in my opinion.
Yeah, no doubt. I was glad to see those games were competitive. I think that division might be a little tighter than normal, and I think that's good. I think that'll help those teams grow and be prepared for some important lacrosse down the stretch here. Now let's go back to Friday night because for some reason I missed this in my notes. But the Mavericks did go into Red Deer and win 10-3. Now the shots in this game were 32-32, so that's crazy to see 10 goals scored by the Mavericks. But it was another big performance by Jace Victoria, 6 points. Devin Gardner puts up 7 points. Those guys, in particular Victoria, he's been lighting it up really all year. And it feels like, to me, the Red Deer home floor advantage isn't the same as it's been in the past since moving out of that barn at the bottom of the hill known as the Connects Arena, and now they're in the Daw Rec Center. And growing up playing there and just coaching, and the Connects has like a very like it's kind of cold in there, and like the fans are right on top of you, and the barn would get packed. You'd often play there on a Friday night, as this game was, but I thought that they had a real home advantage in that home floor advantage in that place. And some of that seems to be gone now in the Daw. The Daw is a little bit more like it's a rec center. It's a little bit more like you can sort of smell the pool and like, I don't know, it's just a different feel. So I think I think that the Mavericks deserve credit, obviously, for going in and winning this game. I thought this game would be closer, and the shots would indicate that. Again, 10 goals on 32 shots is a little rough. I didn't see this game, so I'm not going to comment too much on that. But I think Mavericks just proved that they are, again, going to be in contention to win this division here. What do you got here, Mavericks at Red Deer, that took place on Friday night?
Yeah, I mean, the Mavericks this season, I mean, they're just continuing to steamroll the way that they did last year. And I know I maybe didn't give the Mavericks all their flowers that I should have last year. But this year they absolutely deserve it. Maybe outside of the Sunday contest, we'll get to that a little bit. Even then, it was still a close battle there. But yeah, I think the Mavericks are in hot contention for that top spot. Even closer than last year. So, like, the Silvertips right now sitting 5-2, 7 games played. The Mavericks 4-1 with 5 games played. Like, they are right on the heels of the Silvertips, and I think, honestly, this is the Mavericks division to lose. Straight up.
Yeah, although I'll say not so fast because there's a game we're going to get to here a little later on. But first, we got to clean up Saturday here. Now, the Shamrock, I'll do these two games together. The Shamrocks get a home win, 12-7 over the Rampage. I'll note Rampage did not have their best righty in Dowswell, so that obviously would have hurt them. They looked a little short roster-wise. The Shamrocks take advantage, win at home, as you would expect. And we'll talk about them a little later on because they had a more maybe surprising result on Sunday. But the Chill would get their first non-forfeit win on Saturday as well, being the Marauders 10-7. And that's a big one for them to get off the schneid. That was their first non-forfeit win of the season. They established themselves early in that one and are able to get the win. And I'll have more on them in a second here because both of those the Chill and the Shamrocks played in more notable games, I would say, on Sunday. Anything to add there before we move on to Sunday?
Yeah, I think the Chill, and I mean, we'll get to it once we get into the Sunday as well, but I think the Chill are putting their name in the hat for maybe a top spot in the Central. They're playing phenomenally, I will say, to start the season. Maybe outside of like that 15-7 loss last weekend to the Mavericks, that might have been a one-off there. But yeah, I think the Chill are looking from the outside in last season. I know things didn't go their way, and it's good to see them starting to start their 2025 contest or bid on a higher note.
Yeah, important win for them, and that would set them up for Sunday, where they would go into Innisfail and maybe get a win in the toughest barn in the league. That's sort of become maybe the biggest home floor advantage that exists. Bit of a unique atmosphere there. Fans are pretty loud. It's not the most aesthetically pleasing barn, which always makes it tougher for the road team. And the Mavericks do a good job of usually getting a good crowd in there. And this game turned after a collision with the Chill goaltender. I'm not going to say he got run because to me, he didn't. I watched it 3 or 4 times back, and he does get pushed from the side. And anybody that's played the sport knows that when you're sort of leaning forward, especially when you're trying to shoot, it doesn't take much for you to get sent. And he gets kind of hit from the side and pushed in. Maybe you could say he brings his arms up into the goalie. The camera's so far away. I'm not going to get into that. I don't know if he does or not. I don't put any blame really on the kid. What I didn't like though was when the goalie was lying on the floor. He looked I don't know how seriously injured he is, but it didn't look great. And you just hear all this like excessive screaming from the bench and the stands and all this profanity. And I was just like, what the heck is going on here? Like, these guys need to chill out. That was my first reaction. I mean, it's sort of expected, but not to that degree. I wouldn't say that the Mavericks would get I think they were yelling about too many men or something, and they were worried about getting goalie interference. I think someone was yelling, he was blanking, pushed in, and anyway, so the game goes on, and the Chill this sort of turned the game. The Chill come back after being down late in the game and end up winning 13-11. Everett Muratori once again with 4 goals. I talked about him last week. I don't really need to get into it again, but top 5 player in the league for me. He showed up again in a big way in terms of production. And then hat tricks, and Keenen, I don't know if the last time I saw this. 3 hat tricks from the same team in the same game. Bannister, Wallace, and Kenny all go off for 3 goals apiece. And there was their offense that carried the day for the Chill. That needs to be their identity. They're not going to be the greatest defensive team. They're not great in transition by any means, but their offense has to carry them, and that did in this game. They come back, win 13-11 in a barn burner of a game, and I think this will be an insane Central Final if it happens. What do you got here? Chill and Mavericks. The Chill go into Innisfail and get a huge win.
I think that the Chill did a absolutely crazy job, diabolical work by them to walk in to, and I'm going to go one step further. I think Innisfail is the hardest arena to walk into and get a win in. You look at them last season, over the last 12 games that have been played in Innisfail, there has only been, this is now or I guess 13 if you count this one, this is only their 3rd loss in the last 13 games at home. Like, that is a hard arena to walk into and come away with a win, regardless of what happens in the game, period. I think the Chill do a great job of coming from behind to, quite frankly, steal this win out from right underneath the Mavericks. I mean, it was 11-10 for a good chunk of the third, and then the Chill pop 3, and all of a sudden it's Chill get the win. So I think it's great there. And to build off of what you said about the 3 players with a hat trick on the same team in the same game, when is the last time you saw a Junior B lacrosse game where not only one team had 3 players with hat tricks in the same game, but the other team also had 3 players with hat tricks in the same game? Because Muratori, Sutherland, and Edmonton, I'm probably butchering that last name, all 3 of them also have a hat trick. So you have 6 guys, 3 on each side with a hat trick in the same game.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. Like, I don't think I have ever seen, like, I mean, I'm sure it's happened, but I don't remember the last time it's happened. It's very rare. And I think this is a domino win for the Chill in the sense that if they lost this game, that would have been the season series to the Mavericks already. They only play once more. They had already dropped the game in Innisfail earlier. They would have been like 3 games behind, 3.5 games behind. And now they set themselves up to really contend for the division. I think, the Mavericks have I think that was their first loss of the season, right?
Yeah, that was the Mavericks' first loss of the season.
Right. And the Chills, they're at 2 losses. So they're only a loss behind now, as opposed to being 3 losses behind. Huge swing game for them. It's going to give them a chance to win the division. And I think, as we just touched on, home floor in what should be a central showdown will matter, I think. So that's a huge win, massive win. Like, that's as big of a win in the regular season as you could probably have. And we'll get to another big one here in a second. Probably like these 2 games, this game, and then the next one we're going to talk about, 2 of the biggest wins in the regular season I've seen in at least 2 or 3 years. So
fully agree.
Credit to the Chill, big clutch win for them. All right, so let's go over to Calgary, where the Shamrocks would host the CROW. And man, this was a statement win by the CROW. They win 12-7. I talk about this quite a bit, but a 1:30 game on a Sunday where you're traveling from one city to the next, and by one city to the next, I mean from either Calgary to Edmonton or Edmonton to Calgary, is pretty ridiculous. Like, you're getting on the bus at 8 a.m. or whatever, 8:30, and it's a long bus ride. You're getting off. Sometimes you're getting to the arena late, and it's hard to prepare for. And the credit to those guys. I mean, man, they came out, get a 6-2 lead after 1. I can't state how big of a win this is for that program. I think it's a culture changer, a confidence builder. It's going to have long-term positive effects. I think the Dickin addition was huge. He goes off for 5 goals and 2 assists. Vodchuk with a big game. He scores 4. I was told Elliott had a really nice game. Wells gets a couple of goals. So all their big guys, statistically contributed. And when I say statistically contributed, I make sure to say that because a lot of the time guys can have really good games and not really be prominent on the score sheet. But I mean, when I don't see the game, that's really all I have to go off of. So I'm going to say statistically prominent for those guys. I heard they played really well. I heard a lot of guys stepped up. The Shamrocks, meanwhile, that's a game that I'm sure they expected to win. They're going through a little bit of a readjustment, I think. I'm not sure what they're doing in terms of their personnel. Like, they lost a lot. I'm assuming they're going to try and add as they're hosting the Founders. I don't know where they're going to go, though. Some teams, the good thing for some of these teams that are wanting to contend is I think there's a real class divide, and there's a lot more teams that are sort of don't have much of a chance. So they should be willing to make moves. Whether or not that happens is another story. I'm interested to see what the Shamrocks do with their goaltending. But what I really want to talk about here is the CROW. I heard that Dickin also told the CROW that he wanted to ride the bus back with them so he could meet some of the guys and bond with them, and was prepared to get in his car and drive back to Calgary because he's living in Calgary. And that's what he did. He rode all the way back to Edmonton with the CROW, got back at whatever 8:30, 8 o'clock, and then got in his car and went home. So spending some extra time on the highway, I think that's a good sign. I think he's willing to be a leader there. And this was such a big win. Like, I heard there's some guys trying to come out of the woodwork to get on the crude bench and coach. So, so I mean, man, the crude are sending shockwaves throughout the league. Good for them. I think they've been through some tough times lately, and that was a big win for them. And like I said, a culture changer, and they go in and beat one of the league's prominent figures in the Shamrocks, who are used to winning these games. So good for them.
Yeah, and I don't think I have anything really additionally to add. I think that when you say this was a culture-changing game for the Crude, I think that shows. I mean, they were up 12-4 at the end of the second, and sure, the Shamrocks may have scored 3 in the third, but the Crude did not crumble the same way that, I mean, against the Marauders in the opening game, I mean, that's a little bit of a, black and white kind of scenario here, right? So I think that's a great sign for the culture in St. Albert. And like you said, the fact that Dickon was willing to ride 3 hours one way just to drive back 3 hours the other way, that's 6 hours of his life he doesn't have to spend doing that. But that's 6 hours of his life that honestly are going to be beneficial for him and for the club moving forward. And I am very curious to see how the Crude, continue. And I know we'll get to the preview, in a little bit here, but I'm curious to see how that shapes up this weekend and then moving forward.
Yeah, and listen, I think as a former player, I can talk about this a little bit. This is a guy, too, I think you have to understand. He's a guy that I think was under the impression or was thinking, like, look, I may never play again. Like, I may never step on a floor and pick up a stick, or not pick up a stick, because I'm sure, a lot of guys have their stick around, but, I may never step on a floor and play a meaningful lacrosse game again. And, he gets the trade, and this is a guy that I think wasn't thinking he was going to play. Like, he was prepared not to play, living in Calgary, and then and some things opened up for him, and then there was some trade talk. Like, this kind of came out of nowhere too. So for that to happen and for him to go out there and play like that in his first game in a year, like in a calendar year, I mean, that takes a lot. And so good for him, good for the team, and I think it's exciting for the league. I think it creates some much needed drama in the North, because if they're not going to be able to punch up with the Rebels, the Outlaws have lost a lot to A. They're in a rebuild. The Warriors, as we all know, are as well. So even though the Outlaws are showing a lot of fight, I'll get to that in a second. The Crude are the team that has to do it. They have to be the team that pushes the Rebels. And I think the Rebels will be the first to say they're glad that's going to be the case, because it's going to set them up to be better and get better as well. So good for the league that the Crude have stepped up this way, and we'll see if they can continue it coming up this week. So let's go into the last game of the week, and that was the Silvertips hosting the Outlaws. And, the Outlaws, much like some of the other teams across the league, would play a back-to-back, and this one also had travel involved. They go to Rocky View after playing in Edmonton the afternoon prior. And I didn't watch this game, but I was told by somebody they thought it was a little on the sloppier side. Big game from veteran lefty Hobday, 1 goal and 4 assists. And I'm sure the Outlaws are hoping that they do not lose him to A. He's going to be a big piece if they're going to push somebody in the first round of the playoffs if they make it. I was impressed with how the Outlaws hung in this game, really, though. Like, when I look at it, that would have been an easy, with McDonough back in net, like, that would have been an easier game for them to sort of like sit back and go, oh, we got our win yesterday. We're on the road. We're a young team. And it would have been psychologically easy for them to sort of take a step back and maybe get pounded here, but they didn't. This game was tight all the way through, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for that. So good for them. The Silvertips would go to 4-2 without, 5-2 technically with the forfeit win. And the Outlaws would go to 1-1, technically 2-1, with the forfeit win being attributed to them as well. I don't know if you looked into this much, Keenen. Any thoughts on the finale on week 3 where the Silvertips would get the win over the Outlaws in narrow fashion.
I watched this game a couple times on Sunday. I tuned in a little bit here and there, and it the times I did tune in, I think that people's, I don't know if you want to say perspective or what you want to call it, of the game being a bit sloppier are probably a bit closer to accurate than you could imagine that they would be. I feel like they're compared to how the Silvertips played the Rebels on the Saturday and how the Outlaws played the Warriors also on the Saturday. I mean, those games were going on simultaneously. Both those clubs played literally less than 24 hours earlier. So, I mean, kudos to both of them. They're probably on tired legs. I mean, you got to consider 2.5 hours down the QE2 for both clubs. So, I think given the circumstances, I think there's not a whole lot that you could do there, and I think it was just fatigue more so that was setting in for what just turned out to be a tight, bit sloppier game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think credit to the younger players. There's quite a few younger players on the Outlaws, and some of them playing their first games in Junior B and then having to do it on a back-to-back. Good for them. I think that they showed well, and I think there's more reason for optimism there than maybe we thought going into the season. So good for them, and I hope that they're able to push some teams as well. So that would wrap up the week. So now that we've talked about what went down in week 3, Keenen, let's do a little bit of a power ranking. And I don't even think there's 5 teams I can put up there right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you just sort of how I generally think it shakes out. I think in your top 2 spots are the Rebels and Mavericks. I think when you add in what they did last year, I think when you talk about their transition game and their ability to push the pace and how balanced they are, I think you got to name those 2 teams off the top. And then I think you got to say, look, right behind them are the Chill and the Crude as real contenders, or teams that look like they should be real contenders. Those are 2 teams that have sort of in the past have fallen a bit short of expectation. But as we just talked about, they had franchise changing wins in a lot of senses this past Sunday. So I'm looking forward to where those teams go. I think those 2 teams deserve to be named as, coming up right behind those 2. And then you got teams like the Silvertips and the Kings and a couple of teams like that where they should be playoff contenders. How serious they are or how serious of contenders they end up being is to be determined. But that's sort of where I'm at. I guess I named 6 teams there. I mean, in no particular order, I would go 4 Crude, 3 Chill, 2 Mavericks, 1 Rebels. And then I can't even really name a 5th team right now. That's to be determined. And as soon as a 5th team steps up, I'll put them in. But especially with McDonough being, going back and forth between the Raiders and the Silvertips, I can't put the Silvertips in that group. So that's where I'll sit for now. Once the Kings start playing games, they probably move up into that group. But we'll sit and wait for that. So what do you got here?
Yeah, it's still really early in the season, and for a lot of these clubs, I mean, I say the Silvertips aren't currently credited with 7 games played due to the forfeit wins, and the Kings sitting at 0 games played. So I mean, it's still very early in the season. We haven't had a proper maybe few weeks to see how these clubs are shaking out week to week. So I think I'm gonna do less of a top 5 power ranking and more of just who kind of is topping each division right now for me. Starting out East right now, I think it's still kind of in the middle, but, if barring what, Jarrett Wood said about the SWAT, I think the SWAT are topping my East division right now. Just to walk into Manitoba and split that series in a barn that's relatively hard to do that in. I got to give props to them. I'll give the SWAT the East. Moving into the Central, I think there's no contest here. It's got to be the Mavericks. I mean, you're sitting 4-1, and that one loss, like we said, against the Chill was a 2-goal loss. That easily could have swung the other way. So I think the Mavericks easily top the Central. In the South, The Marauders they look strong this year. And outside of the 15-7 shelling that the Shamrocks gave them, which, I mean, again, the Marauders have only beaten the Shamrocks 2-3 times in their entire lifetime. And that 10-7 game against the Chill, which, like we said, was a great game for the Chill and culture-changing for them. I give Marauders top marks in the South, and then in the North, just off that 12-7 win against the Shamrocks and the Graham Dickin trade and all that, it's got to be the CROW. The CROW get the top in the North, and I think they're going to take it to the Rebels, quite frankly, and I think that's going to be a hotly contested 1-2 in the North.
Oh, man, that's a big-time prediction, buddy. You're going to hear about that.
Oh, I'm sure I will, and I fully anticipate I will.
I got to tell you, man, you surprised me a little bit. I thought you hated the Mavericks, Keenen. You're picking them first in the Central, and now you're picking you're setting yourself setting yourself up nice this week, buddy. Oh, man.
You know what? I'll report back next week on what I get from the teams and from the fans.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, maybe you could sit down with Dave and talk about that one with him. Okay, man. Okay, I like the bold predictions. I mean, I can't fault you for going out on a limb there. So those are sort of where we stand in terms of where the power rankings or where teams sit right now. So before we conclude this podcast, Keenen, tee up everybody for what should be an interesting week 4 here as we go into the May long weekend.
Well, before I do that, I think you're missing a very key portion of this podcast. I think you're missing the boss of the week, my guy.
Yeah, I am.
My predictions got you in turmoil right now.
Yeah, I know. You threw me for a loop, man. Okay, so boss of the week is none other than Graham Dickin. I mean, I think I talked enough about him. 5 goals, 2 assists against the Shamrocks. That's a quality team on the road in his first game of the season. From what everybody out of the CROW camp told me, he really helped lift them emotionally, physically, everything. So your boss of the week is Graham Dickin for the St. Albert CROW. Now, Keenen, you can tee everybody up for week 4.
Now we can get into week 4. So a bit of a quieter week on week 4, given it's May long weekend this weekend. So only a pair of games, and they're both going to end up playing on Thursday simultaneously, both games 9 p.m. The Rebels heading down to Beaumont to take on the Outlaws, and the Warriors are going to head a little bit north to take on the CROW. Only the 2 games this week on CROW, and all 4 North teams in action. What do you think this weekend? Do you have any bold predictions for this weekend?
Not too much, Keenen. I mean, I think there's 2 heavy favorites in those 2 games. Yeah. I don't think there's much to say about them right now. I am kind of interested to see how the Outlaws can play the Rebels, though. Like, I don't know if that's going to be the whitewash that some might think, but we'll see. I think the Warriors are going to be even more shorthanded for the game on Thursday. I know a couple of guys that I'm somewhat close with that I've worked with, trained and stuff that are not even told me they're not even going to be in the province. So yeah, we'll see. I think they're going to be in tough, but again, you never know. Like, who knows? All it takes is one good period. You get some confidence sometimes. So we'll see what happens. But obviously 2 games it's set up towards the favorites, but we'll wait and see how they play out. Other than that, I do think the Kings open up their season as well, finally. Again, like they have not played yet, and the Silver Tips are 5-2. So
the only other games going on for Tier 1 is going to be the Shamrocks visiting the Marauders on Thursday. That game 8 p.m. in Okotoks. That's going to be one hell of a game. That's going to be
that's a good game.
That's a game to watch.
Yeah, because that's a game where the Marauders, can they get over their demons? And then you got the Shamrocks looking to bounce back off of their loss at home to the CROW. So I think you should get peak performance from both of those teams. That's a game that if it was in Edmonton, I would go to, actually. So if you're in the Calgary, Okotoks area, go out to that game. I think you'll enjoy that one.
And then you're correct. The Kings do open up their season with back-to-back against the Blizz at home. Those games on Saturday the 17th at 7 p.m., I believe listed in Mountain Time. I could be incorrect on that. And then Sunday at 1 p.m. So that is your lineup for this week on CROW: Rebels at Outlaws and Warriors at CROW. I've got the call for you in Beaumont, and Mo, I believe you have the call in St. Albert, if I'm not mistaken. So you'll hear both of our voices on Thursday night if you tune into CROW, which we already know you will, because we already know that you've liked, subscribed, and hit that notification bell, so you'll be notified every single time we go live, every time a new Junior Beast comes out. And we thank you so much for tuning in to the Junior Beast once again this week, and we'll be back next week with some more roundup of lacrosse action. Until then, have a wonderful and safe May long weekend.
And as always, everybody, you can hit me up at MJ_9 on Twitter /X and M.Joma on Instagram. I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Plenty to talk about this week, and it's been a lot of fun. So let's continue on. I look forward to continuing on with everybody as the season goes along, and enjoy the games, everyone.